Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Maria Shaheen. I'm the Senior Director of Early Childhood Education for Primrose Schools Franchising Company. I'm super excited to be here with you today to talk about the arts and technology and how when we combine those together, it really helps children practice those valuable 21st century skills. So we use the term STEM a lot, and of course, STEAM is just the term we use when we add the arts to it. We know that young children are naturally engaged in the arts as well as STEM, and so that's where the acronym STEAM came from. Young children are so curious about how the world works. They ask a lot of questions. They try to use materials in many different ways, and they naturally engage in 21st century skills that employers are so desperately seeking in adults, such as creativity, problem solving, perseverance, and even more. And we'll talk about those during this presentation. So for educators working in early childhood settings, and this is defined by the National Association for the Education of Young Children as any child birth to age 8. So that's a wide age span. So for these educators, it's really important to begin understanding the framework that supports and guides STEAM-focused instruction. It's important that educators and leaders in early childhood understand the research on how young children learn. We know that children under age 5 learn differently than children in early elementary, and children in early elementary learn differently than children in later elementary and beyond. So as you're thinking about this presentation and looking at some of the photos and videos, try to keep that in mind, that when educators really understand early childhood, it helps them prepare learning more appropriately, prepare the learning environment, and prepare lessons. Because the ultimate goal is that we create opportunities that fit what we know about how these youngest learners really understand their world and engage with their world. We want the most effective learning opportunities possible. And finally, understanding that research helps us better understand what we should be measuring. Many concepts in early childhood are simply meant to be an introduction, not mastery. There are concepts that we do want children to master. There are some fundamental literacy and mathematics concepts, certainly some technology, science concepts, and so forth. So there are fundamental concepts, but many concepts are meant for an introduction because this is the first time children are learning about them and experiencing those. So when we have that understanding of the research, it helps educators better understand what exactly am I measuring here versus simply introducing. And as we're thinking about measurement, of course, we want to make sure that we're measuring in developmentally appropriate ways for early childhood. So a lot of formative assessment with portfolios and observation and work samples. That is really a lot of measurement that we use in early childhood with summative assessment as well. So the research on how young children learn is quite extensive, and this is not a research presentation. So I'm simply going to go over some key highlights about how young children learn, just so that you can keep those in mind as you look at the upcoming photos and videos that I will share. One of those is play. We know that young children learn through play. It's part of their life. It is, if you look at Fortune 500 companies, they're really trying to look at that research on play even in adulthood. They've realized how important it is. And so you'll see Fortune 500 companies who've taken some of that playfulness and put it into their innovation and their research departments because they know how valuable that is for creativity and innovation. And so young children, of course, engage in play all the time. So as educators, when we make learning playful and purposeful, so there's open-ended play and then there's more guided, purposeful play. as we engage with children in very purposeful, guided play, they start to create their own theories about the world. They create theories about how things work, and this doesn't happen with the same level of depth without including that playfulness in there at the beginning of your learning opportunities. When we take that play and combine it with real world experiences, hands-on opportunities, allowing children to really get in there and experiment and try using the materials in very different ways, this is a really important part of the learning process for young children. And so in addition to those real world experiences, repetition is extremely important. We know that the more frequently that young children are introduced to concepts in many different ways, not just the same way, the better that they'll retain that in their long-term memory. And so I think the final piece is really understanding that arts-based piece. And when we talk about arts, we're not just talking about visual arts. We are talking about looking at young children and understanding that if you've been around children for any length of time, you know that they are constantly moving, they're humming, they're singing, they are engaging with materials in many different ways, very playful. And of course, visual arts is a huge part of that as well. So theater, drama, role play, dramatic play, visual arts, writing, poetry, and so forth. These are all ways that young children express their understandings about what they're learning. As we consider STEM-based or STEAM-based learning in early childhood and early elementary, there's some important concepts we really need to keep in mind. And so you can see those here. We know that young children benefit through learning experiences that provide opportunities to connect new concepts to what they already know. So if you think of that, scaffolding and zone of proximal development, all of those things that Vygotsky and other theorists talked about, young children have some concepts already in their knowledge bank. And so when you introduce something new, they're really trying to make that connection to what they already know. So this is why we have that opportunity to engage children in real world experiences and integrating content areas. So we are integrating the arts with the use of technology and mathematics and science. So when we provide those opportunities for them to engage in design challenges that combine all these real world experiences in integrated content areas, this is when we will start to see their theories about how the world works. And we need to be real careful listeners, because when we watch children engage, we can see very clearly what misconceptions they have about science concepts, about mathematics, about technology, engineering. And this is when we can adjust our instruction to really better support their emerging understandings of these various STEM concepts. So let's take a few minutes to look at some children engaged in creating backdrops for an early childhood junior robotics competition hosted by Primrose Schools. And this was a space-themed competition. So if we look at these images, keep in mind that the children were the leaders in creating the concepts about space that they wanted to represent. So these are their understandings of space that they already have, and they're trying to combine new learnings about space that they're learning through this robotics competition. So I want you to grab a piece of paper and pencil or a pen, or use a device, and just jot some notes to yourself as you look at these photos. First of all, what do the children already know about space? What misconceptions can you see already that they might have? And then what questions would you ask these children to elicit further conversation that gives you more information about what they know and what misconceptions they might have? So on the left, you can see these space monsters. You can imagine where that comes from. It's something that young children think about a lot. Maybe they see it in social media, movies, so forth. And then on the right, you see these fiery meteors, you see some space junk, and then they put their space monsters in the middle. So jot down a few of your ideas that you're thinking about. And as we look at some more backdrops, we can see these teams creating their view of outer space. And on the left, we see stars and planets and various pink and purple colors. And on the right, we see, again, stars and planets, but we also see the sun and a variety of other objects. Something looks like might be something floating in space that's technologically related. Not sure what it is. If it's a satellite, that would be a question I might ask. I might ask them questions about the sun and the pink planets, why they chose the colors that they chose. Think about what questions you would ask them. What do you think they already know about space? And what misconceptions might they have? One commonality throughout most of the artwork was the representation of darkness in their outer space backdrops. Some of the backdrops were pure black, others were black with hints of dark purple or dark blues. And as I mentioned a minute ago, encouraging children to share their ideas and their theories will really help teachers better understand what they truly understand and what misconceptions they might have. In this particular case, the robotics challenge was actually a space-themed robotics challenge, but the main goals were focused on learning coding, learning robotics, and some of the 21st century skills, not their technical knowledge of space concepts. So again, thinking back to some of the earlier concepts that we talked about, it's really important for early childhood educators to think about what are our main goals. In this particular instance, the things we were measuring were not their knowledge of space. However, it very well could have been. And so if it were, this would give us a lot of valuable information. So as you can see here, children are starting to combine their representations of what they already know with some of the new concepts they're learning. So they already know what's on their planet, planet Earth. They know that there's trees and fluffy white clouds, and you can see those represented in this slide here where they've created their own planet in outer space, and now they're combining it with their knowledge of my world and what I think outer space might be. I've got some butterflies in there, but I've also got asteroids and a space rocket. And you can see that in addition to what they envision these planets in outer space might look like, they're taking information about what they know about space travel and NASA mission control engineers. And you can see that the child on the left has created a headset out of paper modeling what he knows about NASA and mission control engineers. And so probably from watching space launches on television or something he learned in the class. But the main objectives of this unit were really, if they were related to space and space concepts, then think about now that they've created these backdrops and so forth, what would your starting point be based on the understandings that you see the children have already? Where would you start asking questions and how would you adjust your instruction? Research suggests that introducing young children to STEM and STEM careers might have a positive long-term impact. And so in the Primrose Junior Robotics Challenge, one of the things the children learned was all the different types of roles and STEM careers that are involved in space missions. And so they engaged in role play related to some of these STEM careers, dramatic play, theatrical reenactments, and so you'll see mission control managers, astronauts, engineers. All children enjoyed using the arts to engage in these career-related learnings during this space-themed robotics challenge. It would be really valuable for some longitudinal research to be done to see how these highly positive, really engaging early childhood STEM experiences related to the different 21st century skills and STEM-based careers do impact later career choices or performance in STEM. For example, we do know that there's research that suggests that males and females perform equally well in math and science until middle and high school. So in early childhood and elementary, we see males and females performing equally well, but then the difference begins in high school. And of course, we see that there's that gender gap that appears later in education and is represented by a very low number of females in STEM careers. So what difference could be made by having these highly positive early childhood experiences and elementary experiences that carry over through middle and high school? So as we think about 21st century skills, we know that creativity, collaboration, innovation are all really important 21st century skills that are part of any well-planned STEM experience in early childhood education. And in the Primrose Robotics Challenge, children were tasked to create their own storyline to accompany the robotics challenge. So a lot of robotics challenges already assign you the storyline. We kind of flipped that and wanted young children to define their own storyline within certain parameters. And then they use their design thinking skills to create an approach to solve a challenge. So they created a storyline and then figured out how are we going to solve that challenge. As they started to create their storylines, you could see on the previous page and on this page, they've got some words down, trying to figure out how they're going to tell the story, but then they start to really think about how do I turn this into a pictorial representation? And then how do I turn that into an actual mission planning grid? So you're getting them to think about different types of literacy and how to convey and communicate to others in different ways. So they're communicating in writing, they're communicating through pictures, and they're communicating through the actual mission planning grids that match their robotics challenge maps. So we're able to see how very young children were able to translate their ideas in various ways. And many of these children were in kindergarten and first grade. As you know, technology is part of young children's lives from the time they're born. And so focusing on using technology in early childhood is really a focus on how do we use technology to improve each child's learning and development. And an important thing to consider when planning technology-based learning experiences is whether that technology is going to promote active or passive learning. We really want to focus on active learning in early childhood. And so using technology in meaningful ways can help children learn coding through those real world activities as they plan their storylines, and those storylines became planning grids. We then introduced the Dash robot, and children began to practice using the robot in many, many different ways as they tested their plans. And so first they tested driving Dash in many different ways, and they created a variety of mazes. Some of them were very complex. So, they realized very quickly what was an easier maze, what was a more challenging maze, how did that impact their coding and ways that they chose to drive the robot. Again, you can see some more mazes here. Very collaborative, providing a lot of opportunities for many different children to try using the robot. Then they started adding obstacles. So now that they're a little familiar with how to drive the robot, now they need to learn, how do I drive the robot and go around different types of obstacles? And then they gradually moved to doing that on the competition mat. So practicing in these various scenarios really helped them become familiar with the different types of coding apps that were available. Some of the children used the easier coding apps, and some of the children who had more experience used the more advanced coding apps. So the beauty of this particular robot and the coding apps provided was that in early childhood, you have a variety of ability levels and experience levels in relation to robotics. And this particular robot really allowed everyone to participate in the same exact design challenge at their own experience level. So we're going to look at a few videos. And as we look at those videos, I really want you to think about, what 21st century skills do you see happening here? These are not all the 21st century skills, but I want you to just think about which of these you see, and certainly there's more 21st century skills. As you watch the videos, I also want you to think about, what technology skills do you see represented? We already talked about the arts quite a bit. And what science and mathematics skills do you see represented? As I mentioned earlier, the 21st century skills were really one of the main skills that we were measuring in this particular challenge, in addition to some of the robotics and coding skills. As you watch, also think about, what learning outcomes would you expect the children to meet if you were going to do something similar? And then what questions would you ask children to find out about their experiences and determine how you might adjust instruction? So let's watch a few different groups of children engaging in this Primrose Junior Robotics Challenge. Failure was an important part of the process, and children were explicitly taught to embrace failure as an opportunity to try things in a different way. We know in engineering and science, how important failure is. That's a key to innovation and creativity. In addition, the children were also taught to support their peers when mistakes were made during the robotics challenge, and then celebrate overcoming failures. In this video clip, you see a child initially struggling with the robot navigation, and then eventually they figure it out. And the children help celebrate the robot at the end, despite any challenges that might have occurred during the competition. We talked about 21st century skills, and as children engage in STEM and STEAM projects, opportunities to practice those 21st century skills are absolutely everywhere. In the Primrose Junior Robotics Challenge, children were explicitly taught to not only embrace failure and be supportive of their peers, but you can see some of the 21st century skills in this video here. Earlier, you saw photos of all the different kinds of backdrops that children made, the scripts that they wrote for their storylines, the mazes they created, and all of the coding. All of this was very collaborative and involved a lot of those 21st century skills that we showed on the slides earlier. In this video clip, think about what 21st century skills you see here as they support each other while one child at a time is navigating and coding the robot. And as we talked about earlier, children in the Primrose Junior Robotics Challenge also learned about different STEM careers. And here you see the team using their previous knowledge about NASA and mission control, combining it with their own understanding of space travel and role playing how this might look. So their storyline was actually based off of NASA mission control. Their storyline ends with Dash Robot saving the little Primrose Friends characters in a scenario that's similar to what one would see in a true NASA space mission. So go ahead and watch this one.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time.
Primrose Mission Control, we are underway with our first collection of our friends. We have hit a minor asteroid, but all is okay. We are within walking distance of collection.
As evidenced from all the photos and videos that you saw, young children learn important STEM and 21st century skills through playful, arts-based experiences. As you begin to plan your own STEM-based experiences, consider ways to help children lead with their own ideas while still providing those planned, purposeful play experiences that help children meet specific required learning outcomes. Had the learning outcomes in the previous space-themed robotics challenge focused more on a clear understanding of space concepts, how would you have structured the challenge differently? What if the key learning outcomes focused on 21st century skills? How would you measure that in a developmentally appropriate way? So all of these different considerations really shape how you create and present your challenge to young children. So as you know, that there are absolutely countless ways to approach STEM learning in early childhood. And as you plan your next adventure, keep in mind the language of young children and remember that A+T equals 21C. It's been amazing. And I certainly hope to hear from you. If you have any questions, here's my contact information. Thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the conference.